Minnesota, America's longest Democratic holdout. No Republican presidential candidate has won here since Richard Nixon in 1972. This almost changed in 2016 when Donald Trump barely lost the state by 45,000 votes.
I'm a lesbian woman. My wife looked at me as soon as Trump was elected and said, "Oh my God, are we going to lose everything?"
Minnesota, more than any other state in the country, is characterized by the rural-urban divide, and it's on full display in Blue Earth County. 2 hours outside the Twin Cities, you're either inside the city of Mankato or outside, among the vast stretch of farmland that begins at the edge of town. Donald Trump won Blue Earth County by 4 points, but lost its urban center, Mankato. Inside the city, the economy is humming. Business is open, winter roads are maintained, cargo moves along the railways and highways that connect Minneapolis with the American West.
My business is about community and it's about inclusivity. And as a business owner, I have not seen any benefit, not one benefit from Trump. Nothing.
Mankato's economy is driven by manufacturing, educational infrastructure, and no doubt, a bit of caffeine. A downtown staple is the Coffee Hag, a local cafe filled with art and acceptance. In recent years, it's become a hub of liberal conversation.
Those of us that were raised in the 60s and 70s were told that racial equality was our goal. And that candidate getting elected with that rhetoric told us that we were way off.
People came to me after the election crying on my shoulder, didn't know what they were going to do. What do I do next? And I said, we have to talk now.
Working with a lot of students, one of the bigger things that I heard was I didn't vote because Bernie didn't get the nomination.
And I want people to get out there and vote because before a lot of people that I knew said, well, I'm not going to go vote. And I think that was a big issue.
Between 2012 and 2016, Blue Earth County voter turnout dropped 2%. But what's perhaps more telling is that in that same time frame, third-party candidates gained serious ground.
Myself and Bill Weld as the Libertarian nominees.
Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson's Blue Earth County numbers nearly tripled.
Demilitarize our communities.
Green Party candidate Jill Stein's numbers more than doubled. Another telling fact is this. Donald Trump did just a bit better here than Mitt Romney 4 years earlier. But Hillary Clinton did far worse here than Barack Obama. She brought in almost 4,000 fewer votes than his 2012 ticket.
When people talk about identity politics, they don't take into account being a man is an identity, being a white person is an identity, being a farmer is an identity. We just always all have multiple identities. And this is where I think Barack Obama did a great job when you reframe that identity to we are Americans and this is the American identity and you make that the thing that people can rally around.
Amid President Trump's ever-staggering popularity among farmers, his trade war with China still holds their agricultural exports in limbo.
I think a lot of people look at the trade disputes and they say, well, this is being hammered out between Washington, D.C. and Beijing. So much of this conversation that gets missed is based on the personal relationships that farmers like yourself have to cultivate, have to develop over not just a few months, you're talking decades.
I think that a lot of people, even in agriculture, do not realize the amount of hard work, the amount of perseverance that it took on an individual level to facilitate making these relationships happen.
Look at the trade deficit with China, $500 billion a year.
Trade tensions between China and the United States are nothing new. There's a massive trade deficit. The U.S. takes in far more goods than it sends to China. Donald Trump's White House is taking on that discrepancy. But during this fight, China increased tariffs on American agricultural imports. This means Chinese buyers are buying elsewhere.
It's not the Chinese government that is buying corn from the U.S. government. National Soybean Growers, National Pork Producers Council, all went to a lot of effort to facilitate these individual relationships. What we have found is that those relationships that took decades to build and a lot of money, in only a few months, those relationships were upended. And I'm not saying that they're all going to end or it's the end of the world, but certainly there is a lack of trust.
Dad had a league team, and if one of them were missing, he would add, "Do you want a curl tonight?" Well, duh. I caught on if I got a ride to the curling club and his team was full, there's 3 other sheets that maybe had a missing person. This building was built in 1950. The building's built by farmers for curling. Corn was in the bin, it's time to go to curling season.
Outside Mankato, small-town skylines are dotted with grain bins and church steeples. The pace appears slower, but people are busy here too. Corn and soybean production dominate the rural economy. Another agricultural arena is pork production.
There is this pressure to continue on a family legacy.
Tonight, I'm meeting in Lake Crystal with Dan Roberts, a third-generation farmer. In addition to growing corn and soybeans during warmer months, he raises pigs year-round.
7 days a week, 52 weeks a year.
And that's the work every day. Doesn't matter Saturday, Sunday, if it ends in Y, you're there.
The animals, the pigs, they come first. So we raise them from the time they're born to the time they go to market. Everyone in this area is rooted in this idea of you have to work for what you get. And what you see out there is the culmination of people's whole lives in most cases.
Perhaps the most unfortunate reality in American politics is operating within a two-party system. I say this because the phrase I keep hearing from voters is, "I didn't like either candidate in 2016." This sentiment saturates pockets of America, and you feel it here as well.
2016, a lot of people think the presidential election was between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Technically, they are right. There were a few other candidates that also ran. If I am not mistaken, you, sir, voted for one of those candidates.
I did. I voted for the Libertarian candidate.
Gary Johnson.
Some of the Libertarian ideas, I think it fits in a lot with what many farmers actually want from their policymakers. I voted knowing that obviously, I mean, it's a two-party system. I was also pretty confident that Ms. Clinton was going to win Minnesota.
All right, let's go back to 2008. On the ballot, Obama, John McCain. Who'd you vote for?
I voted for McCain.
2012, though, running for re-election, Obama, Mitt Romney.
I voted for the Republican Romney.
We talked about Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
And that leaves us with a little election that's happening this year, 2020. Do you have a sense on which way you're leaning?
I will be voting for the Democratic nominee.
No matter who it is?
Certainly would have preferences.
Is your best sense that the voters of Blue Earth County once again support Donald Trump in 2020?
I heard a lot of people say that in 2016, well, we need to give him a chance, right? You know, if I had to guess, I would say we would be very vulnerable to going back the other way.
As much as there may be things that you're drawn to out of a Democratic candidate, there's clearly things that are concerning to you about the guy who's currently in the White House.
Character, integrity, rural America. It's not who he is. He's not us.
Jam up, let's go, baby.
Most people who follow politics will admit it is, and always has been, in flux. America is divided. And politics is the most obvious evidence of this division. So my question is, if politics is how division shows itself, what causes division in the first place? It's a strange thought to have while taking in a college hockey game. Looking out, I'm reminded of my own years as a college hockey player in Pennsylvania. The breakout passes up the ice, and of course, the fierce competition between schools. Minnesota State University's hockey team is a unifier in southern Minnesota, with Mankato insiders and county outsiders watching the weekend home games. But on weekdays, it's back to work. It's also back to the classroom.
Are you sensing that there are more young voters, first-time voters in this community who are really encouraged to get a bit more involved than they were before?
There are a lot of people who are coming in who, have never voted before, and they're like, okay, it's my job to get Donald Trump out of office.
Minnesota State University is the economic anchor of Mankato. Emma Furman runs the school's college Democrats.
Who are you sensing members in this community are kind of leaning towards?
Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Young people that I've talked to, they want a big progressive change. Voting is just a small way that they can make a difference.
In 1862, Western expansion was creating deadly friction in Minnesota. After the United States violated standing treaties with Sioux Native Americans, two-way violence turned into a 4-month war. Conflict ended with a military tribunal sentencing more than 300 Sioux men to their deaths.
Most of them had their sentences commuted, but President Lincoln still sentenced to death 38 of them right here on this spot in Mankato, Minnesota.
On December 26, 1862, 38 Native Americans were marched onto scaffolding in downtown Mankato and hung. To this day, it remains the largest mass execution in American history.
And you get the sense here this is very much a community today that is still very much trying to come to terms with its own pretty dark history.
Incidents happen throughout our community. My daughters were shopping at Aldi's and they were in the parking lot, and this young man, he called them derogatory names and he told them, go back where you came from.
In the last few decades, pockets of Somali immigrants grew throughout the United States, and of all the places to settle, frigid Minnesota became home to the largest population of Somali Americans. During the same years, between 1990 and 2010, the white population in Minnesota dropped by 10%.
America is at a crossroads where a demographic change is happening, and people have anxiety about and fears. And then all of a sudden you see these other cultures and people, languages, people who dress and talk and behave differently.
Is there newly emerging friction between these groups?
The tension is everywhere. They could be exploited because of that, and that's exactly what Trump is doing.
As a candidate, he went out there and issued what essentially amounts to a racial purity test. Calls for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims in general. What did the conversation look like in your community at the time?
Well, there were a lot of fear for my community as to what would happen. But I was one of the voices that was always speaking out against his division.
Abdi Sabri moved from Somalia to the United States in the 1980s as a student. Tonight, we are dining outside Mankato at his family home in Eagle Lake.
My parents told me, you want to become an engineer or a doctor? Which one?
Right.
Which one?
That's it. No wiggle room. Yeah, no.
When I got to college, I really appreciated my culture.
I mean, you went to MSU right down the road here. And
learned even more Somali in college versus when I was in high school where I wanted to learn English. I didn't want nothing to do with Somali.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to have the Somali culture and stuff when the American culture is so enforced in the media.
Yeah.
So some of the people who are more traditional and they know the language, they start looking down upon you because they think that you're ignoring your culture.
I'm good, but I'm not great.
Yeah.
And I want to be great, so.
This part of Minnesota, especially here in Blue Earth County and in Mankato, there's really melting pot.
Somalis are a nomadic people. They have no problem packing their bags and moving. So they call each other, compare notes, right? Hey, what's going on over there? How are the jobs?
Yeah.
20 years prior to when I came, the only diversity that existed was whether you were Catholic or Lutheran. And the Islamic Center, we've developed relationships with up to 9 church groups, and we do interfaith dialogue and conversations.
Okay.
so that we can educate institutions and their leaders that these people are human beings just like everybody else.
In 2016, Donald Trump lost Minnesota by 45,000 votes. That's just 1.5 percentage points. What is most bewildering about that margin? The Trump campaign only spent $30,000 statewide. Given Minnesota's blue history in the last half century, it is strange that a Republican ticket came so close to winning. It's even stranger considering the mere pennies that the campaign spent. In 2020, the Trump campaign will spend tens of millions of dollars here and is also deploying a full-time ground staff.
The Trump brand of conservative politics in this country is a version of something we haven't really seen in modern politics. How concerned are you that sense of tribalism is here to stay, regardless of whether or not he's in office?
Trump showed them that you can win by insulting people, promising things that appeal to the fears of the majority. And that's a short-term gain for the Republican Party at the cost of all their values and the ideals of this country. But this shall pass.
Communication in Minnesota is not as direct as it is in New York, where Donald Trump's from. You know, Minnesotans like to stand shoulder to shoulder with people to talk, as opposed to face to face.
That's like,
you know, we stand shoulder to shoulder and we look at, we look out at the lake and we talk about the weather.
While Donald Trump's tough phrases like lock her up and build the wall were persuasive, there was another campaign go-to that won over Blue Earth County voters.
Drain the swamp of government corruption.
That phrase is at the center of State Representative Jeremy Munson's anti-status quo style of Republican politics.
I was elected to the legislature, got up there, wrote a price transparency bill, and then all of a sudden the lobbyists came out of the woodwork.
Sure.
Like, oh, you can't do this, and saw the machine in St. Paul kind of try to kill my bill.
Today, we curl.
That's pretty good.
Our instructor is Larry Barrett.
Let her go. There we go.
A Blue Earth County local. His roster of students include Olympians, school children, and today, journalists and politicians.
I'm helping it.
A little more to the left.
Go, 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 go.
Good shot.
There you go. Hold up, hold up.
Too fast, too much.
Perfect,
Right to the
perfect.
middle.
Look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, almost on the button, Stella.
Good shot.
This is so much fun. I can't. This is great. And it's not anywhere close as easy as it looks on TV.
Sweet. Sweet. There we go.
I could have gone a little more. All right, that's pretty good.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, let's go inside and talk politics. In this district, there's a lot of self-employed people. There's a lot of farmers. Healthcare costs really impacted this area greatly. And there was only one insurance company in Blue Earth County, Blue Cross Blue Shield, that had insurance. There's hardly any competition for providers.
Big Trump supporters I talk to, right? They say, hey, I support the president for ABC reasons. I don't like all the character stuff. I don't like a lot of his tweets.
Campaigning, a lot of people said, boy, I sure would appreciate a president without thumbs, right? I don't, you know what I mean? They didn't like his communication style.
The Twitter finger, yeah, I get you.
But in the end, I think people have begun to realize that his method of communication is effective to get around the media. Like when he went over to Iraq and he tweeted a picture of himself golfing, and the media went berserk. Meanwhile, he went to Iraq and came back, and I mean, he's kind of playing the 3D chess.
Your best sense about why Blue Earth County, Minnesota voted twice for Barack Obama and then pivoted to vote for Donald Trump in 2016. How could that happen?
A lot of independents wanted to see Barack Obama because we wanted to have an African-American president. I think that speaks to a lot of people. He brought something new to the table that was change that people saw. He wasn't, a long-time, establishment person, and he was different.
Yeah.
And we like outsiders especially, and maybe Barack Obama was seen as an outsider that would kind of shake up the establishment.
Donald Trump's certainly different.
My first presidential election, I voted for Ross Perot.
If you can, try and take off your GOP hat just for a moment. Talk to me about the sort of Democrat coming out the other side that you're finding is appealing to a lot of voters in Blue Earth County.
From all the Democrats that I've talked to in Blue Earth County, Bernie Sanders has come up repeatedly as the best candidate.
In early 2016, Minnesota was mulling over Democratic candidates. That January, a poll in the Star Tribune, Minnesota's largest newspaper, put Hillary Clinton 34 points ahead of Bernie Sanders statewide. But in the caucuses a month later, Sanders beat Clinton by 23 points.
That makes no sense.
His victory was an unthinkable 57-point swing from the Star Tribune's numbers.
I have been all over this country and I have heard horrendous tales.
Throughout 2020, the polls that cried wolf will be hard to believe until real votes are tallied.
What's your best sense on this part of Minnesota with regards to where you think politics are headed?
I'm hoping that people believe that politics is so much more impactful to their lives that they're starting to pay attention. I'm not a big sports guy. Like, I didn't grow up watching sports religiously, but I've watched politics a lot. And if you watch politics like you watch sports, like, this whole country would vote differently. We'd pick our politicians differently.
In Blue Earth County, clashing demographics, third-party challengers, and the rural-urban divide all contributed to the local rise of Donald Trump. And what's left? One Blue Earth, two halves. You're either inside the city of Mankato, or you're outside. A similar divide exists statewide. The inside is the Twin Cities, and the outside, just about everywhere else. In this way, Blue Earth County is kind of a mini Minnesota. In 2016, the county's outside communities gave Donald Trump a win over liberal Mankato. In 2020, Minnesota's outside communities could give Donald Trump a win over the liberal Twin Cities. It all comes down to some of Donald Trump's most crucial voters. Will Minnesota farmers still stand with the president despite trade tensions? Will more campaign spending convince the president's non-believers? In 2020, a Minnesota win means 10 electoral college votes for Trump's ticket.
There's some minerals out.
But given the state's democratic history, a victory here is also deeply personal. It would mean Donald Trump's destruction of a 50-year-long blue wall. Minnesota is known by a few nicknames: the Gopher State, the North Star State, the land of 10,000 lakes.
I like the lake of the summer. Next spin.
In 2020, voters may officially tack on another nickname: Trump Country.
And the winner is